I had just seen my in-laws off at the airport. I was driving back to my army base when our housekeeper of 10 years called. Her voice was shaking. "Don't go home. Check your cameras." I pulled up the footage and my heart stopped. The morning had started the way it always did before a deployment window. Too early, too bright, and too full of things to remember. I had gotten up at 4:30 to help load my in-laws' suitcases into the car, made a pot of coffee nobody had time to drink, and spent the drive to the airport listening to my mother-in-law recite a packing list she had clearly already triple-checked the night before. My husband sat in the passenger seat with his phone in his lap the whole way, thumbs moving occasionally, saying nothing, a habit so constant I'd stopped registering it as a habit at all. At the airport, the goodbye had felt almost ceremonial. My father-in-law shook my hand the way he always did, firm and a little too long, like he was trying to communicate something he didn't have the words for. My mother-in-law hugged me and held on a beat longer than usual. Her hand pressed flat against my back and said, "Drive safe, honey," in that soft voice she used when she meant something and didn't want to make a scene about meaning it. I remember thinking she looked tired. I remember thinking that was probably just the early flight. I watched them go through security, watched my mother-in-law wave one more time before she disappeared past the scanner with her rolling suitcase, the same navy blue one she'd had for at least a decade, patched at one corner with a strip of silver duct tape that had gone soft and gray with age. Then I walked back out to the parking garage, got into my truck, and pointed it west toward Highway 190 and the long, flat drive back to Fort Cavazos. 10 years in this family, and I still hadn't gotten used to the particular quiet that settled over a car after an airport goodbye. It wasn't sad, exactly. It was more like the pause after a held breath, the moment where everyone in the car readjusts to their own life again after playing a supporting role in someone else's departure. I turned the radio on, then off, then on again, landing on a country station that was playing something I didn't recognize, some new song about a truck and a girl and a two-lane road, and I let it fill the silence because I didn't feel much like talking to myself. The plan for the day was simple. Drop the truck at the house, change out of the clothes I'd worn since 4:30 that morning, and report to base by 1300 for an afternoon that was supposed to be nothing but paperwork and a training schedule review. My husband had said he'd head to his office afterward, something about a client call he couldn't reschedule. I hadn't asked which client. I rarely did. His work lived in a part of our marriage I had stopped trying to fully understand years ago, a landscape of spreadsheets and portfolio reviews that I nodded along to at dinner parties without absorbing much of the detail. I want to be honest about something looking back. I trusted him completely, not in the performative way people say that because it's expected, but the way you trust gravity. It wasn't a decision I made every morning. It was just a fact of my life. That's important to understand because it's the reason I didn't think twice when my phone rang 40 minutes into the drive and the name on the screen wasn't his. It was the housekeeper. Our housekeeper had worked for our family for just over 10 years. She came every Tuesday and Thursday, let herself in with the code she'd had since we moved into the house, and always turned the thermostat back to 68 before she left because she knew I ran cold. She had watched me leave for 2 deployments and welcomed me home from both. The housekeeper did not call during work hours. In 10 years, I could count on one hand the number of times she had called me directly instead of texting, and every single one of those calls had been about something practical, a broken pipe, a delivery she needed me to sign for, one memorable afternoon when a stray dog had gotten into the backyard and she wanted to know if I minded her calling animal control. So when her name lit up my phone on Highway 190, somewhere between the airport and the exit for base housing, my first instinct wasn't alarm. It was mild curiosity, tinged with the low-grade guilt of someone who doesn't really want to take a phone call while driving. I almost let it go to voicemail. I don't know, even now, what made me pick up instead. Call it instinct, call it the particular 22 years of training that teaches you to notice when something in your environment doesn't match the pattern you've come to expect. Whatever it was, my thumb moved to the green circle on the dashboard screen before I'd consciously decided anything. "Hey," I said. "Everything okay?" There was a pause on the other end, just long enough that I glanced down at the screen to make sure the call hadn't dropped. Then I heard her breathing, quick and uneven, the particular hitch in someone's voice right before they start to cry. "Ma'am," her voice cracked on the single word. "Don't go home. Not yet." I felt something cold move through my chest, fast and specific, the kind of feeling I hadn't experienced since the last time I'd gotten a call in the middle of the night from a number I didn't recognize. "What's wrong? Is it the house? Is there a fire?" No fire, just..." She stopped herself. I could hear her trying to steady her breathing, the way you do when you're forcing yourself to slow down enough to be understood. "Please, just pull over. Pull over and check your cameras." I don't know how to say this over the phone. I don't remember consciously deciding to take the next exit. I remember the wheel turning under my hand, the truck slowing, the gravel of a gas station parking lot crunching under my tires, and then the gear shift clicking into park while the engine idled, and country radio kept playing that song about the truck and the girl and the 2-lane road, oblivious to the fact that my entire understanding of my life was about to come apart in a parking lot on Highway 190. "Okay," I said again, trying to keep my voice level in a way that felt almost clinical, a tone I recognized from every difficult conversation I'd ever had to have with a soldier who was about to receive bad news. "I'm pulled over. What am I supposed to be looking at?" "The camera app. Do you have it open?" "Give me a second." I fumbled with my phone, my thumb missing the icon twice because my hands weren't as steady as I wanted them to be. "Okay, I'm in. Check the front porch first." I did. The porch camera showed exactly what it always showed. The steps, the mat, the 2 rocking chairs my husband had bought at a farmer's market years ago, and that we used maybe twice a summer. Nothing moved. Just an ordinary Tuesday morning. "There's nothing here. It looks completely normal." "Check the kitchen." I switched feeds. The kitchen camera, mounted above the cabinets to catch most of the room, showed the counter, the coffee maker I'd used at 4:30 that morning, the light coming through the window over the sink, also empty, also unremarkable. I don't understand what I'm supposed to be seeing, I said, and I could hear something rising in my own voice now, some mixture of confusion and the specific irritation that comes from being frightened without yet knowing what to be frightened of. Please just tell me what happened. There was a long pause. I could hear background noise on her end, a door, maybe, or a car passing, something that suggested she was moving, not sitting still. I came back, she said finally, for my insulin. I left it in the bathroom this morning. I do that sometimes, and I didn't realize until I was already at my sister's, so I drove back. Okay. I let myself in the side door, the one by the garage, and I heard the television. I waited. Something in her voice told me not to interrupt. I thought maybe you'd come home early, or your husband had, so I didn't think anything of it at first. I just went to get my medicine from the hall bathroom. But then I heard voices, not the television. Voices. My stomach had gone tight and cold, the specific feeling of dread that arrives before your mind has caught up with your body, before you've assembled the actual pieces of what you're afraid of. Whose voices? I don't want to say it wrong. I don't want to tell you something and have it be wrong. You're not going to tell me something wrong. Just tell me what you heard. Another pause, and then in a voice so quiet I had to press the phone harder against my ear to catch it. Check the patio camera, please. I don't want to be the one who says it. I felt in that moment a kind of internal bracing, the sensation of your whole body preparing for an impact before your mind has caught up. 22 years in the Army teaches you to recognize this feeling. I switched the feed to the patio camera. For a moment, I genuinely thought the app had frozen, that I was looking at some cached frame from an earlier day, because what I was seeing didn't fit into any version of Tuesday morning that made sense to me. My husband was standing on the patio. He was still wearing the shirt he'd had on that morning, the pale blue one I'd ironed the night before because I'd known he had a client call, and he was holding a cardboard box in both arms. Not a delivery box. A box from our house. I recognized it instantly, the way you recognize your own handwriting, because I was the one who had labeled it 11 months earlier in black marker, Grandma's China. Fragile. It was the box we'd talked about moving to storage for almost a year and never had, because life kept getting in the way, because there was always something more urgent than dealing with a box of dishes that had belonged to my grandmother, and that I couldn't bring myself to use or to pack away for good. He set it down on the patio table, next to two others I didn't immediately recognize, and turned back toward the house. Okay, I said, and my voice sounded strange to me, too calm, the calm of someone doing everything they can not to panic in front of a soldier who needs them to stay steady. Is my husband home right now? Yes, ma'am. Is he supposed to be? Doesn't he have a client call today? I don't know about that. I only know what I saw. I kept watching the feed. A minute passed, maybe two. The patio empty except for the 3 boxes sitting there in a neat row, like something staged for a photograph. Then movement again, and this time it wasn't my husband. It was a truck, backing slowly into the side yard, past the gate that was supposed to stay latched. The kind of white pickup that could belong to anyone. No company logo, no plate I recognized from that distance. The kind of truck you'd rent, or borrow, or drive if you were trying not to be noticed driving your own. Do you recognize that truck? Who owns a white pickup? No, ma'am. I've never seen it before. I sat there in the gas station parking lot with the engine idling and the country song long since finished, replaced by something I wasn't listening to at all. And I watched a truck I didn't recognize pull into my own backyard while my husband, who was supposed to be at his office by now, carried out a box that held the only thing I had left of my grandmother. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a thought was starting to surface that I wasn't ready to look at directly yet. My in-laws had been at the airport less than an hour ago. I had watched them walk through security with my own eyes. So why did some small, cold part of me already suspect that this wasn't over, and that whatever was happening in my backyard right now was only the first layer of something much larger? I have to call you back, I said, though I don't think either of us fully believed I meant it, because neither of us hung up. We just went quiet on the line, both of us watching the same feed from different rooms of the same crisis. The white truck idled in the side yard. My husband walked back into frame, said something to the driver I couldn't hear, gestured toward the house. Then he turned and walked back inside through the patio door. For almost a full minute, nothing happened. Just the empty patio, the 3 boxes on the table, the truck's engine running, exhaust shimmering faintly in the morning heat. I found myself holding my breath in a gas station parking lot 2 hours from home, watching a static frame of my own backyard like it might change if I looked away and looked back. Then the patio door opened again, and this time my husband wasn't the one who walked through it. I want to describe exactly what happened in my body in that moment. My chest didn't just tighten. It felt like something physically dropped inside me, because the woman walking across my patio in a linen blazer, wheeling the same navy blue suitcase with the silver duct tape patch, was my mother-in-law. The same woman who had hugged me at airport security less than an hour earlier. The same woman who had told me to drive safe in that soft, meaningful voice. The same woman I had watched walk through the TSA checkpoint with my own eyes, her rolling suitcase clattering slightly on the tile before she turned one last time to wave. She set the suitcase down beside the patio table, not urgently, not like someone who had forgotten something and doubled back in a panic, but with the unhurried ease of someone arriving somewhere she was expected. Is that who I think it is? I said, and I heard my own voice come out thin and strange. Yes, ma'am. Her voice had dropped almost to a whisper, like she was afraid the camera might somehow carry sound both ways. That's her. I saw her go through the gate maybe 5 minutes before I called you. She was at the airport. I watched her get on a plane. I don't know how she's there, ma'am. I only know what the camera is showing you right now. I stared at the screen as my mother-in-law crouched slightly to unzip the suitcase, and even from that distance, moments. Even through a compressed video feed on a 6-inch phone screen, I could see that it wasn't packed the way a suitcase headed to Seattle for a 2-week Alaskan cruise should have been packed. It opened easily, without the strained zipper tension of a bag stuffed for 2 weeks of clothes and toiletries and the various small necessities of vacation. It opened like something that had never actually been full, empty, or close to it. A prop, staged to look like luggage, wheeled through an airport for the sole purpose of being seen boarding a flight that, as far as I could tell, she had no real intention of taking. My husband came back into frame a moment later, carrying a 4th box. He set it beside the others and said something to his mother that made her laugh. An easy, unguarded laugh. The kind you only produce around people you trust completely. The kind that has nothing to hide from. "I called you back immediately," the housekeeper said into the silence, and I realized I hadn't spoken in almost a minute. I didn't know what else to do. I didn't want to call the police, I didn't know if that was right, and I couldn't call your husband, obviously, and I didn't have anyone else's number, so "You did exactly the right thing," I said, and I meant it, even though my voice sounded like it belonged to someone else entirely. "Listen to me. Are you still in the house?" "I'm in the laundry room. I came back in through the garage after I saw the truck. I've been standing here. Can they see you? Is there any chance they know you're there?" "I don't think so. The laundry room door was already closed when I came in. I need you to leave right now. Go out through the garage, get in your car, and just drive. Don't stop to say anything to anyone. Don't try to explain. Just go." "Ma'am, I'm so sorry. I should have called you the second I heard the voices. I should have." "This is not your fault," I said, and something in my own voice surprised me. Some steadiness I didn't know I still had access to underneath the growing static of panic. "None of this is your fault. Please, just go. I need to know you're safe before I can think about anything else." I heard a door on her end, the specific clatter of someone moving quickly through a space they knew well. Car keys, a garage door beginning its mechanical climb. "I'm leaving now," she said. "I'll call you when I'm somewhere safe." The call ended. I sat there in the truck with the phone still pressed to my ear for a few seconds after the line had already gone dead, staring at the frozen last frame of the patio camera feed. My mother-in-law crouched over an empty suitcase in my backyard, while my husband stacked boxes of things that belonged to me beside a truck driven by a stranger. I thought, absurdly, of the exact moment at the airport when she had hugged me and said, "Drive safe, honey," and I understood now, with a kind of sick clarity, that she had not been saying goodbye to me at all. She had been saying goodbye to a version of the morning that she already knew I wasn't going to understand until it was too late to stop. I put the phone down in the passenger seat and made myself do the thing 22 years of training had built into my body before panic could take the wheel instead. I decided deliberately not to drive straight home yet. I needed to understand the shape of what I was looking at before I drove into the middle of it. I called my sister next. She lives outside North Carolina, and she has always been the person I call when I need someone to tell me I'm not losing my mind. "Something's happening at the house," I said, before she'd even finished saying hello. "I think my husband is cheating on me. I think his mother is helping him hide it." I told her everything, fast, in the clipped shorthand you use when you're trying to get facts out before emotion catches up to them. The staged airport goodbye, the empty suitcase, the boxes, the truck. My sister listened without interrupting, which she almost never does, and that alone told me how badly this had landed. "That doesn't sound like an affair," my sister said finally, her voice dropping into the serious register she only used when she meant it. "An affair doesn't need a truck and 3 boxes of your grandmother's china." "Then what is it?" "I don't know. But if he's moving things out of the house while you're gone and using his mother as cover, that's not romantic. That's logistical." I didn't understand what she meant yet, not fully. And if I'm honest, some stubborn part of me didn't want to understand it, because an affair felt smaller somehow, more survivable, than whatever the word logistical was quietly suggesting to me. "Maybe he's having an affair with someone and they're clearing out a guest room," I said, grasping. "Maybe his mother found out and is trying to help him hide the evidence before I get home." "Maybe," her sister said, in the tone of someone humoring a theory she didn't believe. "Or maybe you should stop trying to make this fit a story you already know and just go find out what's actually happening." I sat with that for a moment, watching a woman push a shopping cart past my window into the gas station, entirely unaware that on the other side of the glass, someone's marriage was quietly disintegrating in real time. "I think I need to go home," I said. "I think you do too. But call your CO first. If this turns into something legal, you want a record that you notified your chain of command the moment you knew something was wrong. Don't let this become a story where you just showed up and reacted." It was such a practical thing for her to say, exactly the kind of grounded advice she always gave, and it was exactly the anchor I needed. I called my battalion executive officer next, my voice steadier now that I had a script to follow, a procedure, something that felt like solid ground. "Sir, this is Captain Morgan. I've got a family emergency developing at my residence. I may need to request emergency leave effective immediately." "Go," he said without hesitation. "Handle it. Keep me posted and take whatever time you need." That single word, "go," did something to me that I hadn't expected. It gave the situation a kind of official weight, transformed it from a private catastrophe into something with structure, something with a next step. I wasn't just a woman falling apart in a gas station parking lot. I was a captain responding to a developing situation, and I knew how to do that. I pulled back onto the highway with the patio feed still open on my phone, propped against the dash. My mother-in-law was gone from frame now, the boxes still stacked neatly on the table, the white truck idling with its driver leaning against the door, scrolling his own phone, waiting for something. I drove faster than I should have, replaying her sister's words the whole way. "That's not romantic, that's logistical." I turned the phrase over and over, trying to make it mean something smaller than what my gut was already beginning to suspect, some version of events events where this was ugly but ordinary, a betrayal I could categorize and grieve and eventually move past. I want to be honest about something. For the better part of that drive, I believed I understood what I was walking into. An affair, a woman in a guest room, something ugly but ordinary. I had no idea that the boxes on that patio table had nothing to do with another woman at all, or how wrong I still was about how deep this actually went. The white truck was gone by the time I turned onto our street, but the boxes were still stacked on the patio, visible through the side gate someone had left unlatched. My husband's car was in its usual spot. My mother-in-law's rental sat parked at an angle behind it, like she'd pulled in fast. I parked, turned off the engine, and sat there for a moment, doing the thing I'd trained myself to do before walking into any volatile situation, taking one slow breath, letting my shoulders drop half an inch, reminding myself that whatever I found on the other side of that door, I needed to be the calmest person in the room. I walked in through the front door instead of the garage. I wanted to see his face the moment he realized I was home. He was in the kitchen, on the phone, and when he saw me, his expression did something I will never forget. A fast, involuntary flash of pure alarm before he visibly forced his features back into something resembling normal. "Hey," he said, ending the call abruptly. "You're back early." "Am I?" It wasn't a question. Whose truck was in our backyard an hour ago? Something flickered behind his eyes, a rapid calculation, and I watched him decide in real time which version of events to try first. "A donation truck," he said. "For goodwill. I've been meaning to clear out some of the stuff we never use. My grandmother's china isn't stuff we never use, and your mother doesn't help load a donation truck an hour after boarding a flight to Seattle." The kitchen went very quiet. I watched him glance toward the hallway, and a moment later my mother-in-law appeared in the doorway, still in the linen blazer, her expression arranging itself into something careful and apologetic, the specific face of someone who has rehearsed an explanation and is now realizing the rehearsal didn't account for this particular audience. "Honey, let me explain. You were at the airport," I said. "I watched you go through security. I watched you wave. I know how this looks." "Then tell me how it actually is, because right now it looks like you staged a goodbye at an airport so I wouldn't ask questions while my husband emptied boxes out of my own house." My husband stepped forward, hands raised slightly, the universal gesture of someone trying to de-escalate a situation they created. "Nobody's hiding anything from you. Mom she came back because I needed help moving a few things before the estate lawyer's appointment tomorrow." Estate lawyer. For my father's trust? It's complicated, it's boring, it's not what you think. What do I think it is exactly? He hesitated, and in that hesitation I understood, with sudden and total clarity, that whatever version of the truth he was about to offer me had been constructed on the drive between the moment the housekeeper called him, because I now understood, watching the two of them exchange a quick glance, that someone had warned them I might be onto something. And the moment I walked through the front door. "I'm not having an affair," he said finally, like this was the accusation he'd prepared to defend against, the one he'd built his whole explanation around, and something about the specificity of that denial, offered before I'd even said the word, told me I was asking the wrong question entirely. "I didn't say you were." The silence that followed lasted just long enough for me to watch both of them realize, almost simultaneously, that I hadn't accused him of the thing he'd just denied, which meant I still didn't know what I actually was accusing him of, which meant for the moment they still had room to maneuver. "Then what's this about?" my mother-in-law asked too quickly, too eager to redirect. "That's exactly what I'm asking you," I said. "What is this about?" Neither of them answered right away, and in that pause, standing in my own kitchen in the clothes I'd worn since 4:30 that morning, I understood that whatever I'd walked into was bigger than a fight over furniture, and that the two people in front of me were not confused or frightened. They were stalling, carefully, like people who had rehearsed for exactly this moment and were now discovering, in real time, that the script didn't quite fit the questions I was actually asking. I did the thing I'd trained myself to do when a conversation stops producing information and starts producing only performance. I stopped talking. "I'm going to change out of this uniform," I said, "and then I'm going to make some calls. When I come back down, I'd like an actual answer, not a rehearsal." I walked upstairs without waiting for a response, and I heard, faintly, the low murmur of the two of them talking fast and quiet in the kitchen the moment they thought I was out of earshot. I didn't try to listen. I already knew, with total certainty, that whatever they said to each other in that gap would matter less than what they'd already failed to say to me. Upstairs, I sat on the edge of the bed and called a divorce attorney a friend from my last duty station had used and recommended years ago, back when I'd filed the number away the way you file away a fire extinguisher, hoping never to need it. Her assistant told me she was booked solid. I said it was urgent. 30 seconds later, I had an appointment for that afternoon. "Before you come in," the attorney said when I called her directly to confirm, "do one thing for me. Pull the county property records for your home address. Just search your county assessor's site. It takes 2 minutes and it might save us both a lot of guessing." I hadn't thought to do that. It hadn't occurred to me that a house I'd lived in for a decade might have a paper trail worth checking, because it had never once occurred to me that anyone would have a reason to touch it. I found the assessor's portal on my phone, typed in our address, and waited while the page loaded slower than my patience wanted it to. The current owner of record was not my name and my husband's name, the way it had been since we bought the house 11 years ago. It was a name I didn't recognize. A trust, established in his parents' names, dated 4 months earlier. I sat very still on the edge of the bed, staring at the screen, rereading the transfer date 3 times as though it might change if I looked at it long enough. 4 months. Long before this morning. Long before any of the boxes, the truck, the staged goodbye at the airport. Whatever this was, it hadn't started today. Today was simply the day I happened to notice it. I called the attorney back immediately. "The house isn't in our names anymore," anymore, I said. It's in some kind of family trust. My in-laws' names are on it. There was a brief pause on her end, the particular silence of a professional recalibrating how serious a case had just become. Bring everything you can find, she said. Bank statements, any documents you can access, anything with a signature on it. And don't confront them again before you come in. Not until we understand what we're actually looking at. They're downstairs right now. Then go downstairs and be pleasant. I know that sounds impossible, but if they think you already know how deep this goes, they'll have time to prepare a better story. Right now you have something they don't realize you have yet. What's that? Confusion they think is still working in their favor. I sat with that for a moment after we hung up, turning the property record over in my mind. 4 months of a house quietly changing hands beneath me while I went to work, ran units, filed leave requests, trusted a man I'd been married to for 18 years to handle the parts of our life I didn't have time to watch closely. I thought about the china box downstairs and how small and almost innocent it suddenly seemed compared to what I was starting to understand I was actually looking at. Boxes could be replaced. A house quietly signed away without my knowledge was something else entirely, and I had a sick, growing certainty that the house was not going to be the largest thing I found. The attorney's office overlooked a parking garage instead of a lake or a skyline. Nothing scenic, just the practical view of a woman who had built a career on other people's worst days and didn't need a window to remind her the world outside was still turning. She was in her early 60s, silver-haired, and had the specific calm of someone who has heard every version of betrayal a marriage can produce and stopped being surprised by any of them years ago. I brought what I could. Screenshots of the property record, photos I'd taken of paperwork I found in my husband's desk drawer while he was still downstairs with his mother, rehearsing whatever version of the truth they'd eventually decide to offer me. A folder of old bank statements I hadn't looked at closely in over a year, because he'd always handled our finances, and I had never once questioned that arrangement, the way you don't question the person who's always fixed the car or always cooked dinner, because the division of labor in a marriage becomes invisible once it's old enough. The attorney went through everything slowly, methodically, occasionally circling something on a legal pad without comment. Has your husband always managed your household finances? She asked. Yes, since we got married, and you trusted that. Completely. She nodded without judgment, a specific nod of someone who has heard that exact answer from dozens of women before me, and knows it's rarely as foolish as it sounds afterward. I want to show you something, she said, and turned her computer screen toward me. She'd pulled records on 3 properties tied to our address history. Our home, a rental property I vaguely remembered him mentioning once, years ago, something about a tax advantage, and a 3rd property I had never heard of at all. A lake house, the attorney said, purchased under an LLC 8 months ago. Guess whose name is listed as managing member? I already knew before she turned the screen fully toward me. His, and guess what asset funded the down payment? I felt something cold settle low in my stomach, the specific dread of watching a pattern complete itself. The investment account. The investment account, she confirmed, $210,000, moved out over the last 8 months in amounts small enough that a casual glance wouldn't flag them. 10,000 here, 15,000 there, each one labeled something bland: portfolio adjustment, asset reallocation. I sat there in a leather chair that was probably meant to be comfortable, and felt nothing but the specific numbness of watching a number that large become real. $210,000. Money I had helped earn, helped save, believed was building towards some shared future I no longer fully understood the shape of. There's more, the attorney said, and something in her voice made me brace before she'd even continued. The trust that now owns your primary residence. I pulled the formation documents this morning while you were driving in, and it was drafted 5 months ago, not 4. The county recording was delayed, which is common. Paperwork like that often takes weeks to actually post, but the trust itself and the intent behind it existed a full month before that. Before what? The attorney looked at me directly, the kind of look that precedes something a person genuinely doesn't want to be the one saying out loud. Before your last deployment orders were even finalized, she said, I need you to understand what I'm looking at. This wasn't a man panicking and hiding assets during a marriage that was falling apart. This was planned carefully over most of a year, timed around your training schedule and your deployment windows. Someone built this to unfold while you were away, piece by piece, so that by the time you came home for good, there would be very little left for you to actually find. The office went quiet except for the low hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic through a window that didn't open. I thought about every late night I'd spent doing paperwork on base while my husband stayed home managing our finances. I thought about every deployment I'd trusted him to hold our life together during. I thought about the china box on the patio, small and almost sentimental compared to what the attorney was describing, and I understood with a kind of sick clarity that I had not yet reached the bottom of what this actually was. I still believed, sitting in that office, that I understood the worst of it. I did not yet know how wrong I was. The attorney's paralegal knocked twice before letting herself in, holding a thin stack of papers she printed while we talked. The bank responded to the records request, she said, faster than I expected. I think you'll want to see this before you leave. The attorney scanned the first page, and I watched her expression change in a way I hadn't seen from her all afternoon. The careful, professional composure slipping for just a second before she caught it and smoothed it back into place. There's a second account, she said quietly. One you didn't know existed. What kind of account? A joint brokerage account opened under both your names 4 years ago. You co-signed the original paperwork. She turned the page toward me. Do you remember signing this? I looked at the signature line. It was my handwriting, unmistakably my actual signature from 4 years earlier, on a document I had no memory of ever seeing. I don't remember this. You wouldn't, necessarily. Financial advisors bundle paperwork all the time, especially with a spouse who trusts the process. A signature page slipped in among a stack of tax documents doesn't always register the way it should. I stared at my own name, in my own handwriting, on a document that had apparently existed for 4 years without my conscious knowledge of its purpose. What's in the account now? The attorney turned the second page toward me, and this was the moment, sitting in that office with the air conditioning humming and the light through the window flattening everything into the specific gray of a late afternoon that had already gone on far too long, that I finally understood the true scale of what I had actually walked into that morning. The joint brokerage account had held just under $400,000 as of 18 months earlier. Retirement contributions, combat pay. I'd never spent because we hadn't needed it. A modest inheritance from my grandmother that I had specifically asked to keep separate years ago, and had been assured in so many words that it was. Over the past year and a half, the account had been drained to $11,000. Not through a single transfer, not through some dramatic theft I could point to and name, but through a slow, deliberate pattern of withdrawals disguised as routine account maintenance, each one small enough to avoid triggering the kind of alert that might have made me look twice. All of it moved into the trust that now owned my house, the LLC that now owned a lake property I'd never seen in person, and a series of renovation invoices for that same lake house, invoices that listed my husband's electronic signature and totaled more than the down payment itself. He didn't just hide assets from you during a divorce, the attorney said, her voice level and careful, the voice of someone delivering a diagnosis rather than an accusation. He and his parents built an entire financial structure designed to strip nearly everything you owned together, timed specifically around your deployment cycle, executed slowly enough that routine trust would keep you from looking closely until it was essentially complete. The affair, if there even is one, isn't the story here. It never was. The story is that for the better part of 2 years, your husband and his parents have been systematically transferring your family's entire net worth out of your name, one small, unremarkable transaction at a time, using your own signature, your own trust, and your own absence to do it. I sat there in that chair, in a building I'd never been inside before that afternoon, holding a stack of paper that represented 18 years of a marriage I now understood I had never actually fully seen, and I felt something in me go very quiet, past anger, past the frantic disbelief of the last several hours, into a kind of stillness I recognized from exactly one other moment in my career, the specific silence that arrives the instant a soldier finally understands the full scope of a situation they'd been managing piecemeal, one crisis at a time, without realizing they'd been standing inside something much larger the entire time. $400,000, my grandmother's inheritance, my combat pay, my own signature, used against me, on paperwork I had never knowingly agreed to. I need everything you have, I said. Every document, every signature, every dollar. You'll have it, the attorney said, but I need you to understand something before we go any further. This isn't the kind of case that ends with an apology and a fair settlement. This is the kind of case that ends in front of a judge, with fraud on the record, and I intend to make sure it does. The case took 4 months to reach a courtroom, and I spent most of them doing 2 things at once: running my unit at Fort Cavazos during the day, and building a paper case against my own family every evening with the attorney's office on speakerphone. My husband's attorney tried, in the early weeks, to frame it as a misunderstanding, a family loan structure with unconventional paperwork, nothing criminal, nothing that couldn't be resolved with a fair settlement and some embarrassed apologies. The attorney didn't argue with him directly. She just kept filing motions to compel additional records, and every time the bank or the county or the trust administrator responded, another piece of the structure came into daylight that made the misunderstanding defense a little harder to sustain. I testified for most of a day in October. My mother-in-law did not look at me once from the moment she sat down until the moment she was excused. My husband's attorney spent 40 minutes trying to establish that I had been an absent, inattentive wife whose military obligations had left him managing our finances alone out of necessity rather than opportunity. The attorney's cross-examination took 11 minutes to establish, using his own signed documents, that the trust and the LLC and the brokerage account had all been assembled with a level of planning that no absent, inattentive spouse would have left room for. The judge, a woman who wore her reading glasses low on her nose and had clearly heard every version of this story before, did not rule that day. She recessed for 3 weeks to review the full financial record the attorney had assembled: 400 pages of bank statements, signature comparisons, county filings, and a forensic accountant's report that traced every transfer back to its origin with a precision that made the whole scheme look, on paper, exactly as deliberate as it had actually been. When she finally issued her ruling, she used a specific phrase I've thought about often since: a documented and sustained pattern of financial fraud, executed with the apparent participation of extended family members and timed to exploit the plaintiff's military service obligations. She ordered the house returned to the marital estate in full. She ordered the lake property liquidated and the proceeds restored to the brokerage account. She ordered a formal referral to the county district attorney's office for further review of possible criminal fraud charges, separate from the civil judgment. My mother-in-law left the courthouse that afternoon without speaking to anyone, including her own son. I watched her walk to her car alone across a parking lot in late October, her navy blue suitcase nowhere in sight this time, just her hands empty at her sides, and I felt none of the satisfaction I had expected to feel. Mostly I just felt tired, the specific exhaustion of someone who has spent 4 months proving, methodically in front of strangers, that the family she married into had spent nearly 2 years treating her absence as an opportunity rather than a sacrifice. The housekeeper still comes on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Thursdays. The day the settlement finalized, I drove to her house myself instead of calling and handed her an envelope with the paperwork showing her mortgage paid off in full, because a woman who calls you from a laundry room with her voice shaking, who tells you not to go home before she even knows what she's protecting you from, is not someone you thank with a card. She tried to give the envelope back to me twice before she finally understood I wasn't going to take it. I still live in that house. I changed the code on the side door within the first week, then changed it again a month later. Out of an abundance of caution, I'm not sure I'll ever stop feeling. My grandmother's china sits back in the hall closet where it always had, still in the same box, still labeled in my own handwriting. And some evenings I open that closet for a reason that has nothing to do with the box at all. And I find myself standing there anyway, just looking at it.